Okay. Now, however, with the introduction of that bird in Finland, now, of course, that diminishes other species of birds in that area. However, that introduced birds population was increased. Okay, so in other words, uh, it may favor the modification of human or action of human introducing this type of bird to a particular area may be beneficial, say, cause the increase of the population of this type of bird. However, that diminishes the other species of bird in that area, and that decreases the diversity of that particular area. Okay? So, like for example, we have this in table 3.1, dependence of bird biomass and diversity on urbanization. Now, like for example, here, the number of birds in Helsinki, so that's a type of city, is around, the type of bird is around 1,089 number of birds. However, the countries of birds, however, pila lang ka species of bird ang makita in that particular area. There is only 21 species. 21 species of bird. So you could see the decreased diversity of that particular area with the introduction of that bird or species of bird. Okay, so from 1,089, so it's more than 1,000, say, birds in that particular area. Say for example, here in MVC, there is a bird that is being introduced here, and that favors the growth of that particular bird that has been introduced. However, say if you are going to count all the number of birds here, say it may reach even to 1,000. However, with the introduction of this new bird, only a few species can be found in here. Now, without the introduction, say for example, without the introduction of that bird here in MVC, say for example, the species richness in terms of the birds, or say the species of bird you could see here, may reach maybe up to 50 to 100. But with the introduction of that particular bird, say for example, now because maybe the one that is being introduced may chase or may prey on some of the native species of bird found in this MVC, Mountain View College, say for example. And that drives this native species away from Mountain View College. So, well, there could be no, say, the number of birds in this campus may increase. However, the number of species may decrease. So, what dominates then in the bird population? It's the invader, the bird that is being introduced, and that becomes an invader. Okay, so that is one impact of expansion. Okay, now causes of animal contractions and decline. So what causes the decrease in the population or the decline of animals in terms maybe of numbers, or it may be in terms of number of species? Okay, now one contributing factor for the decline of animal is the so-called pollution. So pollution has been a problem. It's a global problem nowadays. Factories, industries, And even in our communities, we are producing more of these wastes, and that is said to be polluting our environment. Um, men tends to make men's activities tend to make so many wastes, and they are not disposed properly, and that may cause then the decline in the population of animals. The extreme effect of human interference with animals is extinction. Now, if this pollution problem will not be addressed properly, if there will be no solutions in our communities or even in our cities or in our countries or in globally, then sooner or later this will lead to so many extinctions of the different species of organisms, not only on animals but as well as on plants, if this pollution will not be addressed properly. Now, this decline may be brought about partly by intentional killings for subsistence and commercial purposes, but much wildlife decline occurs indirectly. For example, through pollution, habitat change, or loss and competition from invaders. Now, it is true that one factor that may contribute to the decline of these animals is not only pollution, but it could also be hunting. Intentional killings, we call that intentional killings or huntings, kani mga hunters. For commercial purposes, say for example, mga wild elephants, they were hunted because they want their isa na kanang ivory nila nga tusk. So they were hunted for commercial purposes. Now, and that causes them the decline. Okay. What else? Another decline is, of course, what is in the not only pollution that caused the decline, but also hunting, and of course, what constitutes this pollution. So what are those mga pollutants? It could be kaning mga pesticides. So pesticides are often used as seed dressing for crops. So kaning mga pesticides. Sige lang. Spray here and there. Then later on when the rain comes, the water containing the pesticides will be flowing through the canals, then to the rivers, and then to the to the oceans. And who are those which are affected? Of course, not only the plants in the particular river ecosystem or in marine ecosystem, but as well as much more our fishes, our marine organisms. Marine animals will also be affected by these pesticides. And that is one contributing factor for the decline. Pero sa aning mga fish kill, anong na mga fish kill sometimes? Because maybe of the increased, say, pesticides that are being directed toward the rivers and the marine ecosystems. So which causes then the decline in the population of fishes. Okay. So these have highly detrimental effects on pollination. Okay. So also in crops and in wild plants, pesticides is also detrimental effects on pollination. Of course, when many of these, say for example, many of these insects are said to be, if the farmer used to introduce pesticides, now not only those pests will be killed, but as well as also those mga pollinators will also be killed. Now if pollinators like bees would be affected greatly by these pesticides as one of the pollutants, then the pollination would also be affected. So when pollination is affected, then the production of the farmers would also be affected. So there will be less harvest as a result. Okay. Now another case of these mga pollutants aside from pesticides is the kaning mga one case of this pesticide is this kaning mga DDT. This is one toxic substance. These were introduced on a worldwide basis. Kaning DDT. DDT was persistent, capable of wide dispersal, and reached high levels of concentration in certain animals at the trophic levels. Now, the tendency for DDT to become what? More concentrated as one moves up the food chain is introduced further by data. Okay, so what is the result of this DDT then? Now, DDT had a major effect on seabirds. Unsa man yung mga DDT? Mga kuan siya, mga pesticides. So, ibang gamit sa farmers and then carried by the water that goes to the rivers or to the marine ecosystems, to dagat. Now, as a result, one effect of this, of course, some birds or say some fishes may not be affected, especially the larger ones may not be affected, or say even the smaller ones may not be affected. But later on, this consumer of this fish are the one that will be affected because they have accumulated much of the biomass in terms of this DDT. Of course, gamay ra ang DDT nga nakaon sa fish, but man tends to eat more of this fish, especially kaning mga small fishes. So the next consumer will be affected because of the accumulation of this biomass for the DDT. Present now incorporated in the biomass of the, say, in the seabirds. As a result, their eggshells become thin, nipis na ilahang eggshell, and that affects the reproduction in these fish-eating birds. So one result of DDT, which is a pollutant, is the thinning of the eggshells of these seabirds. So of course, the reproduction would be failed. So that decreases the reproduction. Now another is kaning bald eagle, kaning bald eagle. Also peregrine falcon. Now, showed decrease in eggshell thickness and population decline from 1947 to 1967. So what contributes to the decrease in the population of these bald eagle and kaning mga falcons? Because these used to eat, say, mga fishes that may consume kanang DDT, and the effect when they consume that fish that have taken in the DDT is the thinning of their eggshells, and that of course kung nipis ang eggshell, the embryo will not develop well, and they might be susceptible to any consumers of these eggs, and they will be eaten up immediately, and the result, there will be decline in the population of this bald eagle as well as falcon. That is one effect of this pollution. Now another pollutant capable of, say, contributing to the decline of these animals is this heavy metals, mga heavy metals. Like for example, methyl mercury. Like for example, in say kaning mga ginapang mine. Nowadays, our mountains are being mined, and miners use mercury, especially for say the separation of this gold mine. from the rest of the particles in the soil where they go for mining. The result is when the rain comes, of course, this mercury will be carried by the water, and the water will find its way down to the rivers and down to the oceans, to the seas. And the result is there would be, pollution, these heavy metals uh, building up of this mercury in marine organisms. No? Especially mga filter feeders, like mga shellfish, na mga kinasun. Shellfish, they have strong tendency to concentrate the metals from very dilute solution. So as a result, the shells may not be greatly affected because maybe they just consume a small amount of this mercury. But when the consumer, say human, will eat up these shells, of course, they will not eat only one shell, but this may eat a lot of these shells, and the result is there will be accumulation of this heavy metal, and the result is, of course, there is an adverse effect, or this may even fatal, fatal to human. Okay, so that is one effect. So not only for human, but of course to other marine organisms that eat up those mga filter feeders. So kinsa man gakaon na ng filter feeders? Of course, the next consumer level, other say mga smaller fishes, the bigger fishes, okay? And the result is there will be fish kill as a result. So if ever there are fish kills, say for example, in a particular place, I think this last month only, there was Facebook na ay fish kill in a particular place somewhere in Tingoog. Dughan kayo mga matay, naglutaw lang ang mga isda. And the community, the people were so happy. But of course, these fish are said to be not safe unless there should be a study that would be conducted as to the real cause of this fish kill. If the result is the accumulation of these heavy metals, and that if it's consumed by the community, then there would be community kill as a result. So it's very, very dangerous. Okay. Now, another pollutant is oil. Oil pollution is a serious problem for marine and coastal fauna and flora. Although some of it derives from natural seeps. Seabirds are especially vulnerable since oil clogs their feathers. So, with this oil spill, sa mga boats, kaning mga ship na to, mga submarines, say if there are some mga daot, and then that causes the oil spill, it could be hazardous to our marine organisms. And not only for our fishes there, but as well as for our plants, mga aquatic plants, that may kill some of our fishes and some of our aquatic plants. And of course, if they would be eaten by our seabirds, then they could also be affected because this oil, this will lead to enteritis. So there will be digestive problems for our seabirds later on that may cause that contributes to the death of the seabirds. And that is because only of this oil pollution. Okay. Much of the damage caused to marine life as a result of this particular disaster was caused not by the oil itself but by the use of detergents. Now sometimes government uh, tried to solve or eradicate this oil spill by introducing a huge amount of detergents. However, um, these detergents would be another, okay, the oil may be diminished, so that oil problem, oil pollution may be um, solved. However, another problem arises because with this huge amount of detergent that has been introduced to eradicate these oil pollutants, now that could be another pollutant to marine organisms. Okay, now it could be say hazardous as well to marine organisms. So if one problem is solved and because of the introduction of one chemical, then that may also lead to another or creating another problem. So that is what happened. Okay, so as much as possible, when problem arises, you have to see to it that when you solve that problem, it may not create another problem. So that is true to oil spills when trying to eradicate it by using huge amount of detergents introduced in the sea, and another problem created. So still marine organisms were greatly affected. Now another cause of decline on top of pollution is the habitat change. When you say change in habitat. Now land use and land cover changes, including the conversion of natural ecosystems to cropland, have so modified the habitats that animal declines have ensued. You know, nowadays, kaning mga, say, mga forested areas, say for example, when there is a forest, we are expecting that the forest, which is naturally made, is said to be very, very diverse. However, when man convert that area, that land, into cropland, tamnan, ang mga bukid, tamnan o mais, tamnan o other crops, so it turned into cropland. So, the result is there will be decline in animal population. Now, say for example, itong mga birds that thrive in the large or the big trees, or maybe those mga reptiles, or say mga say even mammals that thrive in that thick forest ecosystem. Now, when man tried to convert this into cropland, now the result, where will this those species of animals go? Of course, they will be driven away from that particular area, which are now converted, which is said to be converted into cropland. So they cannot thrive in that particular area. Okay, and that causes the decline of animal species, not only in number but as well as in terms of the species. Now, like for example, kaning wild tiger, Panthera tigris. One example. Now, before in Africa, its historical range was from the Caspian to southern China. But now, in less than a century, it occupies only 7% of this range. And now, there may only be a few thousand individuals left in the wild. Now, because of course, the conversion of this grassland ecosystem where this wild tiger thrive, there is no conversion of this huge grassland into, it could be a community, or it could be say other maybe into a cropland, cropland. So the result is there will be decrease in the number of wild tigers. So, and now, only a few left as wild. Okay? Now, in Britain, currently declining species include red squirrels, Scottish wildcats, mountain hares, mice, and mga hedgehogs. So, not only tigers were decreasing in number, but as well as other mammals. Not only tigers, but other mammals were decreased due to the change in the habitat. So, kung i-disturb mo ang ilang habitat, when you try to disturb their habitat, from, say for example, from grassland to, it could be cropland, then of course, you cannot see anymore that animals in the particular area. So, they would be diminishing. Okay? So, that's the result of the decline in animal species and numbers. Another cause of animal decline could be hunting. So, we mentioned hunting. Unsa ning gipanghan? Like, for example, unsa ning kaning black rhino, no? Diceros bicornis, black rhino. So, African black rhino, particularly for its horn, have caused a crush in numbers from several hundreds of thousands in the early 1900s to 70,000 in the late 1960s and to a mere 2,410 na lang in 2004. Imagine ninyo na, class. From 70,000, how many black rhinos left this time? Because of hunting, we only have so far around 2,000 left for black rhinos. Why? Because they're being hunted due to this for its horn. Ginagamit ang horn for for ornamentals or whatsoever. Now another African elephant. African elephant. Numbers were 3 to 5 million in 1930s and 40s, but are now only 600,000 left this time. Imagine from millions to only 500,000, almost 500,000 left. Why? Because of purposeful hunting. Particularly when it involves modern firearms and snares, means that the distribution of many animal species has become smaller very rapidly. So what happened to our African elephant? It's now declining in number. Okay? What's the reason? Because of hunting. Okay? Now, many of you are used to hunt birds. You have your guns, air guns. Now, especially men, they used to hunt. They love to hunt. Okay, and do you know the overall impact later on? Sooner or later, now there will be more of these birds that will be diminished, or maybe extinct sooner or later because of this hunting habit, hunting activity by man. Now another disturbance, another cause of the decline is this vehicles and roads are another threat. Construction of roads and the increased number of vehicles. So daghan na kaayo mga sakyanan, sabak kaayo. And then there are so many roads constructed. Mga diversion roads are being constructed. Now, this is another threat to the different animals and plants. So many of these organisms' habitat are said to be disturbed due to the construction of roads and increased number of vehicles. The vehicle speed, noise, and mobility upset remote and sensitive wildlife populations. And this problem has intensified with the rapid development in the use of off-road recreation vehicles. Especially kaning mga off-roads. No? Because these off-road vehicles, dito na sila sa mga bukid-bukid. And these are said to be mga rich areas where several plants and animals thrive. And because they are being disturbed by the noise of these off-road vehicles, then they will go to another place. So of course their population would sooner or later be decreased, because of course how would they reproduce? Reproduction would be affected. Okay, so that's one cause of this increased number of vehicles and construction of roads. Another, these leisure activities. The creation of leisure activities like golf areas. Mga golf areas or mga jet ski. So that is leisure activities that create problems for some species. A survey of the breeding status of the little tern in Britain gave a number of instance breeding failures by the species apparently caused by the presence of fishermen and bathers on nesting beaches. So this is one of the marine, so little tern, marine organisms. The result is because of this mga daghan na kaayong jet ski, or daghan ng mga fishermen, daghan ng mga boats. So they fish in that particular areas. The result is daghan kay, of course, na mga beaches gipang improve ang mga marine ecosystems into beaches. The result is the marine organisms' habitat is said to be disturbed. Okay. Now, the presence of even a few people inhibited the bird from returning to their nests. Okay. So kaning mga birds, kung daghan ganig tao, dili na sila ganahan mapuyo. Like for example, in Valencia class, where are these birds coming from? Now, these birds are coming mostly maybe from San Fernando. One of the caves there in San Fernando, or maybe forest in San Fernando, is now being mined. So, daghan ng mga tao, and of course, they are being mined. And the result is, where we could find now the birds. They are now transferring from the forest to the cities. So, mauna na din ha. You could see in Valencia City, nasa mga wires, usually at between 5 to 6 o'clock. Now, they start to stay on the wires. Why? Because they don't have any habitats anymore in the mountains. They are being disturbed by people, and of course, because of mga mining. That is another reason. Okay, so one reason for their decline. Okay, another, new types of construction can pose threats. Like for example, kaning mga wirescapes, mga tall buildings, towers. So kaning mga canals, irrigation, ditches. So, that, or kaning mga turbines, that is said to be threat. Threat to birds. And even into marine organisms. Dili lang sa birds. Say, for example, there will be more of these towers that will be constructed, mga tall buildings will be constructed. Say for example, in Makati, you could see so many tall buildings there. And birds doesn't like to stay in that particular area. They love to be in the trees. So they are said to be distracted by these mga tall buildings. Okay? So it's said to be a major threat to birds. Okay? And other organisms. Another, kaning use of fire could be directly detrimental to animals. So, though, of course, accordingly, there are some species of animals, no, which can be affected with kaning mga sunog-sunog, mga fires, kaingin, okay, some mahadlok. But of course, there are some species are said to be not affected by these fires. Now, say for example, kung naanad ni sila nga na fire, birds and mammals usually do not panic or show fear in the presence of fire. That is accordingly. And some are even attracted to fires and smoking or burned landscapes. So, though not all are said to be affected, but some favors. Some favors when there is fire. Now, the introduction of a new animal species can cause the decline of another, whether by predation, competition, the introduction of disease, or by hybridization. So, another cause of decrease or decline of animals is the introduction of new animal species. Like, for example, kaning red squirrel. The British native red squirrel, which used to be widespread throughout Britain, has contracted in range very greatly since the introduction of the North American gray squirrel at the turn of the 20th century, and is now largely restricted to parts of Scotland. One cause is that the red squirrel have been killed by a disease that was introduced with the gray squirrels. Now, native red squirrels, many of them died with the introduction of this gray squirrel from, say, from Scotland. No? Why? Because with the presence of gray squirrel, that introduces disease, and which may not kill the gray squirrel, but that greatly affected the red squirrel. Okay, so that is one cause of decline of this red squirrel with the introduction of the gray squirrel. So the result, there will be hybridization, and this is found to be a major problem with fish in California, where many species have been introduced by humans. This results when fish are transferred from one basin to a neighboring basin, since closely related species of the type likely to hybridize usually exist in adjacent basins. One species can eliminate another closely related to it through genetic swamping. So another effect is this hybridization. It could also be a major problem with, say, fish in California. So, many species have been introduced by humans, on the result, hybridized. And the hybridized ones keep transferring from one place to another. Ang result, mawad-an na og isda ang katong area. Why? Because the native ones, which used to thrive in that particular area, like for example in General Santos City, were used to be a place of so many fishes. No? Doon pa lang diya sa, I'm from General Santos. I was born in General Santos City. And before, it is said to be very, very popular with fishes. Not only tuna, but other species of fishes found in bisag mga few meters lang from the seashore. You could see mga fishes there. But of course, This time, fishermen will no longer fish few meters from the seashore. They used to fish outside General Santos Seas, General Santos areas, and they even go to China Sea or even to Malaysia. That's the destination of the fishermen in General Santos. Why? It's because of what? One reason there, hybridization. Because hybridized ones tend to transfer from one basin to another. From General Santos to another basin. And even to Malaysia, even to Indonesia, and even to China. Okay? So that is what is the result of the decline of the number of species there. So one species can eliminate another closely related to it through genetic swapping. So that may eliminate the other species that is out of hybridization. Now, the complexity of possible causes of decline and the difficulty of establishing the precise causes of such decline is exemplified by the case of the house sparrow. So what is this house sparrow? It's a bird. Now, this bird, which caused to be a prominent and chicky inhabitant of cities in UK and Western Europe, has suffered from near catastrophic crashes in numbers in the last few decades. The possible explanation, so what causes the decline in this so-called sparrow? Kaning sparrow in UK. First, these are the possible explanations. Changes in the urban habitat. So, we say the habitat in the cities have drastically changed due to urbanization. So, of course, there will be more buildings, so there will be a lot of disturbances, and marine ecosystems have been converted into beaches. This bird, which used to feed on kaning sparrow, which feed on marine fishes, will said to be found to have gradually declined. And one explanation is due to the changes in the urban habitat. Another, the use of pesticides in garden and parks. So that causes the decline of this sparrow. Decline in the availability of insects and other food sources. So insects that feed on where house sparrow feed. Okay, so they will also be affected. Another is pollution from draft in cars and from electromagnetic sources. Kaning mga pollution. Okay, that causes the decline of the sparrow, reduction in nesting spaces. Because of course the nest, these birds will not make nests in a disturbed places. And remember, this is urban cities. So when the city is developing, so it's highly urbanized, so there will be more buildings and there will be more disturbances, and that decreases the nesting spaces, that causes the decline. Another, increased predation by cats and sparrowhawks. So daghan na ilang mga predators, gamay na sila, and then increase na po ilang mga predators. Okay. Next, increased competition for food from magpies, gulls, feral pigeons. So there will be in cities, there will be competitors for this sparrow. Daghan sila mga competitors, and that causes their decline. Okay. Now, animal extinction